Down in the heart of San Pedro, California, there are two old buildings standing right near each other. They both came up in the roaring 20s, and for a while, they were like the twin pillars of this booming port town. But, times change, and they both hit this wall, this same exact problem: either figure out a new way to exist or just fade away. Well, this is the story of how one of them was brought back to life, and the other was just left for dead.
And that really makes you wonder, right? Can a couple of buildings actually shape the future of a whole town? In this explainer, we're going to dig into that. We're going to look at two totally different ways of thinking. One was all about creative healing, and the other, well, sources say it was more like a political hijacking. And these two approaches ended up deciding the fate of a lot more than just bricks and mortar.
All right, so let's meet our two main characters. On one side, you've got the old Security Trust and Savings Bank, which most people now know as the Croatian Cultural Center. Looks pretty grand, right? But it's quiet. And on the other, we have the ghost of the old J.C. Penney building, a place that just screams hustle and bustle from a totally different time. These are the two we're talking about.
Now, to really get why their paths split so dramatically, we've got to rewind. Let's go all the way back to the beginning, when they were basically partners in crime, holding up a thriving downtown.
Just try to picture San Pedro back in the 1920s. I mean, the place was electric. You had the sound of trolleys, Model Ts rumbling down the street, shoppers and sailors everywhere. This was a town that was going places. And these two buildings, they were built to be the shiny, modern engines of all that progress.
Okay, so let's get the official stats on these two. The Donn Allan Building, that was a brand new J.C. Penney back in 1922. And then just 6 years later, in 28, the huge fancy Security Trust and Savings Bank opened up with its massive columns and all. Both of them were these big, bold statements about prosperity.
But 100 years is a long time. The whole world of retail that J.C. Penney was a king of, it went to the malls, and then it went online. Banking, that went digital. So by the time we get to the 2010s, these places weren't engines anymore. They were basically, as our sources call them, obsolete machines from a totally different time.
And this quote, man, it just nails the feeling. All that energy, all that noise and life was just gone, replaced by a heavy, dusty silence. You can almost feel it, right? The emptiness. And that was the challenge they were both up against.
And right here, this is where everything changes. They both had the exact same problem, being old and irrelevant. But the solutions they found, well, they couldn't have been more different. One road led to a total rebirth, and the other straight to abandonment. So let's break this down. The story of the Donn Allan Building is all about a personal, creative vision that brought it back from the brink. But the Croatian Cultural Center, that's a story, according to the sources, of political games that ended with a beloved community space just sitting empty.
Okay, so let's start with the comeback story. The new owner of the old J.C. Penney, Jennifer Wolfe, is actually a therapist, and when she looked at this rundown old building, she didn't see dollar signs. This quote says everything. She saw a soul that needed healing. And that one idea, that perspective, changed the entire game.
So the big idea wasn't just to, fix the leaks and rewire the place. It was way deeper than that. This building was born for consumption. It was a place where you bought stuff. The new plan was to flip that completely on its head, to turn it into a place for creation. They actually call it a cathedral for the creation of stories. How cool is that?
So what does that actually look like? Well, it's going to be called Voxel Micro Video Labs. They're building 16 professional-grade little studios down in the old basement where they used to keep inventory. And then on the main floor, a huge digital wall. The whole point is to give local creators and entrepreneurs the tools to make amazing stuff, but to do it fast, to do it at what they call South Bay speed. And this, right here, this is the philosophy that's driving the whole thing. It's not just about turning a profit, it's about building a legacy by opening doors for other people, by creating something that lifts up the whole community. It's about inclusion, big time.
All right, now we have to switch gears and look at the other building, and wow, it's a totally different story. For about 8 years, from 2009 to 2017, the Croatian Cultural Center was awesome. It was run by a nonprofit group called the Friends, and it was a super active community hub. Then bam, April 2017, they get evicted. The city says it's to make room for the Croatian Consulate. But then, just 2 months later, that whole plan gets scrapped. And since then, nothing. The building's just been locked up, falling apart. And listen, this was a huge loss. This wasn't some quiet little building. The Friends group put on over 400 events there. We're talking everything from Croatian folk dancing to Peruvian art shows. It was a place for everyone. The lights were always on, the doors were always open. It was alive.
So you have to ask, why? Why on earth would you kick out a group that was so successful? Well, according to former councilman Rudis Ferenic, the problem was that the center had become more of a multicultural center. Get this, the very thing that made it so vibrant was seen by some as the reason to shut it down.
And it turns out, the whole reason for the eviction was basically a fantasy. The plan to move the consulate in, it was never going to happen. The building was too old, it didn't meet modern European Union security standards, something the Consul General himself later admitted, so a buzzing community hub was killed for a plan that was dead on arrival.
And that brings us right to the heart of it. What's the difference between a landmark that lives and one that dies? What we're seeing here is that it all comes down to two completely opposite ideas about what these community spaces are even for.
I mean, just look at them side by side. The Donn Allan story is all about opening doors. It's about taking a private building and turning it into something for everybody. The Croatian Center story? It's about closing doors. It's about a community asset being lost because the vision for it got too narrow, too exclusive.
Really, what we're talking about is this idea of community stewardship. It's about taking care of a place, not for a tiny group, not for one single purpose, but for the good of everyone, for the long haul. One of these stories is just a perfect example of how to do it right, and the other is a pretty painful lesson in how to do it wrong.
So, in the end, we're left with this massive question, and it's playing out for real on the streets of San Pedro. What really makes a landmark matter? Is it the fancy architecture and its original purpose? Or is it about its ability to change, to throw its doors wide open, and to become something new for the community that's here right now? It seems like the choice is between a beautiful, silent tomb and a messy, loud, living cathedral for the future.